Welcome back to Talking with Ted about hiking on Tuesday or whatever day it happens to be at the moment. All right, so we are going to shift gears somewhat and talk about the Grand Canyon. Now, the Grand Canyon gets a section in its own right. It is grand after all right? Additionally, it is a canyon of canyons, and so the diversity within this one environment is phenomenal. All right, so I'm going to share a couple of resources and explain that there are a lot of different ways to see the Grand Canyon, Arizona's symbol, icon, and so forth. All right, so people spend lots of time and money rafting, days. They spend lots of time and money and so forth hiking for days. All right. So recently I decided to take a bird's eye view of the Grand Canyon, and I took a helicopter ride with a former employee of the Yavapai County Free Library District, David. Okay, quite a pilot. He is also a trained geologist. Okay, so perfect combination for flying over the Grand Canyon. Now, some of the guidebooks, I'm going to share a couple of them, don't like the noise, and I understand that. The Nankoweap basin, which we're going to talk about, the Boucher Trail, when you're looking down on it from a helicopter and you're looking up at the helicopter from the trail, both perspectives have their place. When my daughter wanted to hike the Grand Canyon, it was on her bucket list, to the river. Dad, how about we do that? Okay, when should we do it? Father's Day. Oh, terrible time of year to do it, but there we go. We came back up and she heard people, tourists, at the top talking about, wow, that is just amazing. One of the guidebooks claims that how much time do people spend at the Grand Canyon on average? 15 minutes. They get to the edge, they look in. Yep, pretty cool, see ya. She said, as she heard people talking about how amazing it was, you really can't say that you've seen the Grand Canyon until you go below the rim. All right. I would say there is some merit to that. Books are critical, and we do have some video that we will hopefully bring into this from the helicopter to show you just how amazing it is. It's very worthwhile. Some of the books, though, I would highly encourage, more than any other place in the Southwest, to read something about the canyon, the place you're going. All right, this is library land. We do books a lot. Okay. Colin Fletcher, The Man Who Walked Through Time. We are going to begin with the Tonto Trail, and the lateral trails coming down to it on the South Rim is one of our focuses on our 7 hikes in the Grand Canyon. Okay, great book, worthwhile reading, classic really for the Grand Canyon. And I don't have all the copies of all the books that I'm going to mention here with me today. Another one, Grand Canyon Treks, a guide to the inner canyon routes, by none other than probably Mr. Grand Canyon hiker Harvey Butchart, and I'm probably butchering his name. Some people are Grand Canyon hikers. This guy is one of them. I don't consider myself a Grand Canyon hiker, like it's all about hiking in the Grand Canyon. I've hiked there some and recommend it. You got to do it. But he hiked there thousands of hikes. Totally unbelievable. Several guidebooks. This guy knows everywhere. So it'd be worthwhile to read some of his stuff. Rafters, Sunk Without a Sound, The Tragic Colorado River Honeymoon of Glenn and Bessie Hyde, by Brad Dimrock. They refloated where these people went, disappeared, never to be seen again. What happened? A mystery. Okay, continues to this day. And then, of course, the single greatest adventure story in the Southwest is what, in my opinion, The Exploration of the Colorado River and Its Canyons by John Wesley Powell, another raft trip experience. You've got to read that. And it also talks a lot about the geology. Okay. All right, and finally, plants rule, animals drool. All right, so this guidebook to plants of the inner canyon, so it's the lower reaches down there, very worthwhile. Unfortunately, books like this, and I do have a couple of entries in this book, include only a few plants, like 200. How many plants are in the Grand Canyon? Different species? 3,000. So it leaves stuff out, and it just has to do that. All right, so now about the hikes. All right, and we are going to focus on, to start with, the Tonto Trail. Okay. Additionally, this is a national park, so the rules and restrictions are unique to the Grand Canyon. You need a backcountry permit to hike overnight below the rim. Day hiking, you don't need this, but if you're going to hike and stay overnight below the rim, you need to get a permit, backcountry office. All right. In the summer, it's very difficult to do this because the volume is overwhelming, which is weird because that is the worst time to hike below the rim. What's your preference? Would you like to hike in a refrigerator or an oven? There is no shade below the rim. It is a very stark, barren desert. Okay, so when I did the Tanner Trail, started at 1 a.m., got to the river 7 a.m. I stuck my feet in the water. I thought steam was going to boil up. I was so hot, the water was so cold. My goal was to return back above the red wall by noon. I made it by 10 o'clock because it was a scorcher, because it was middle of summer, worst time to go. I don't know why I did it, but I started at 1 a.m. So there's ways to strategize it, but I did the Tonto Trail between pieces together between November and February. And it's a lot easier to get a permit at that time of year as well. So think about it. When I hiked the Dripping Springs Trail, got started 6 a.m. or so, 7 a.m. is in the winter, 10 degrees. Sun coming up, perfect, no wind. That's Arizona hiking, ideal, cool. Okay. So we're gonna focus on the Tonto Trail, the end points. We're gonna be between the New Hance Trail and the South Bass Trail. We're gonna start with the New Hance Trail. All right, and this is a weird trail because according to, let me see, who is it? Ron Atkinson says it is the South Rim's most difficult trail. These trails, I'm not going to talk about the corridor trails, which everybody does, along with the mules and the puddles they leave behind. I don't like to wade through that stuff. These are primitive trails, off the beaten path. They are not far in the middle of nowhere, usually. South Bass gets kind of out there. But they are not used by the mules, and some of the people have difficulty finding them. So you've really got to pay attention to what you're doing. The corridor trails, north and south Kaibab, Bright Angel, you can just one foot in front of the other and just plod along. You cannot do that on these other trails because you have to pay attention, which is much more appealing to me. So, New Hance Trail, you're going to start 5.5 miles or so east of Grandview Point. And the way that I did these, I usually did this hike-bike combination. Instead of having to have somebody drop me off, pick me up, blah, 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 I drove to, in this case, Grandview Point, parked, bicycled to the New Hance trailhead, which is not really much of a trailhead at all because you cannot park there. You have to park some distance away, and so it's kind of strange. We're going to include profiles and the maps so you can see where everything is at and the steepness, all right? So it's about 7 or 8 miles from the rim to the river following this route, and it's kind of serpentine. It's kind of choppy. If you just did this like you do on the corridor trails, lots of drop-offs, cliffs, and you'll see some of that in the pictures. So you have to have heads up. When I did this trail, I looked out there for the first time, though I'd hiked the Grand Canyon many times, and I said, where did everything go? This is a big hole in the ground. So it is, these trails and this place fosters thinking. Slow down, pause. What is it all about? Okay, the Grand Canyon will swallow you up, and that gives you a chance to immerse yourself in a different frame of mind. Very worthwhile, okay? There's a little sign there, and happens at the top of the Hermit Trail, the New Hance Trail. It says, do you really know what you're getting yourself into? People die doing this, so you better think about it before you get down there. One of the trailheads, it says, so-and-so Boston Marathon runner died on this trail. Again, this is a desert. This is hot. This is not Boston. This is not, some cool place in Portland, Oregon. All right, this is very challenging and hot, dry, okay? This particular trail, there's no surface water on the New Hance until you get to the Colorado River, okay? So you're gonna go skinny down and you're gonna learn geology. The red wall will constantly come up as a feature that is mentioned in the guidebook. So if you don't know anything about geology, you're gonna pick up a few things before it's done, all right? So there's limestone layers and sandstone layers, etc. So the red wall is a huge cliff section, and getting down through that where the side canyons, again, it's a canyon of canyons, break through, allows you to get through there. Sometimes it's more interesting than other times. All right, great views. You get down to the Colorado River, and then you're gonna go back up to the Tonto Plateau, heading east to, in my case, Grandview Point, okay? All right, New Hance Trail. No trailhead, 5.5 miles east of Grandview Point, so you're gonna have to park further back, kind of walk to the trailhead, and then actually do the trail, okay? Or bicycle, like I did. Now we're gonna go to the other end, South Bass Trail. This is, you have to cross a section of the Havasupai Reservation. If there are people there from the reservation, you will have to pay a fee to cross that corner of the reservation. Okay. The road itself, pretty good dirt road because it's pretty flat. I went in November and there was no one there at the reservation to collect a fee or anything, so press on. This particular trail is a little easier to follow. It is further off the beaten path, though. The trailhead is pretty well established trailhead, unlike New Hance. There is a North Bass Trail, obviously on the north side of the river, which I have not done. We'll get to the North Rim here in a minute. So it similarly follows a goofy path to the platform of the Tonto Shelf. All right, and that is what the Tonto Trail follows, is this shelf about 4,000 feet below the rim, so you're not all the way down to the river. And some of these trails, like the Grandview Trail, if you're gonna hike the first time ever in the Grand Canyon, I would either pick the Grandview Trail or the Dripping Springs Trail, because they don't go to the river, okay? If you go all the way to the river, and that may be on your bucket list, like my daughter, that's fine and good, but I would start with something not so far, deep, long, okay? You get to the platform on the Tonto, okay, and then at South Bass, you have to go another couple of miles to the river. There is a metal boat there chained up, some historical symbol. A lot of these trails were by miners, tourist people, ranchers, many years ago, 100 or so years ago, and they explored all this, put it together, and we are the beneficiaries of their monumental efforts of figuring out what's down below the rim in this giant space. So the South Bass, it's about 6, 7, 8 miles to the river again, but you're gonna pick up the Tonto and then go east towards the Boucher Trail. Now that's about 25 miles. Didn't do it that way. So I hiked down the South Bass. I hiked about 7 or 8 miles, I think it was, to the Turquoise Canyon. Then I turned around and went back because I'm piecing it together. You end up doing some parts of it twice, up and back, both directions, okay? So it takes longer, you're doing more of it, but it's part of the experience. You'll see more things that way. I had a little problem with a water filter. There is some surface water down towards the Colorado River, little side thing, and there was a pool, but my filter had a crack in it, so it was useless, my water filter. So I ended up hiking a long way without much water, but in the winter it wasn't too bad, so be prepared. I could have stashed water on the way down and carried more to begin with, but I didn't realize my filter was messed up. Okay. This particular section of the Tonto, I was talking to a former student from Mayer High School. He's in the library in our chess tournament, and he is afraid of heights, okay, even though he's 6'6" or something. There are some parts of this trail where you will, and we'll show you the picture there, my toes are sticking out over the cliff, and it's 500 feet down to the river. Really cool. So fortunately, having experience with rock climbing and so forth, technical and comfortable in a vertical environment. You don't have to get on the edge and look straight down hundreds and 1,000 feet, whatever, in the Grand Canyon, but you can have lots of opportunity to do that, and it's pretty neat. The vegetation, that's what that guidebook talks about, is there, but it's sparse and it's rather unusual. It's kind of the influence of the Mojave Desert coming up the river, so it's some weird stuff in the Grand Canyon. Very worthwhile to spend time looking at it, thinking about it. All right, now we're gonna go to the Hermit Rest Trailhead and the Boucher Dripping Springs Trail. Again, this is one that I would suggest introduce yourself to the Grand Canyon's Dripping Springs Trail. Okay, so you get to Hermit's Rest, west of the village a few miles. Now, the interesting thing about this particular trail and the trailhead, okay, so in the summer you cannot drive to this trailhead. Have to take the shuttle. So it's a limitation. And the Park Service, again, is in a very challenging position. They are trying to make this resource available to everyone, but preserve it so it's not loved to death. That's a challenging mission. So they allow certain flights over the canyon, like David with the helicopter. Only certain paths you can do this with. You can't just zoom in and out of the canyon. That's not appropriate for the environment of other people and users. So, you cannot drive to the trailhead in the summer, but in the winter, you can, all right? So you get out to the Hermit's Rest Trailhead, and then you're gonna go from the village west to the Dripping Springs Boucher Trail. And the Dripping Springs Trail is pretty straightforward, pretty easy, pretty wide, pretty simple, and you don't go all the way down. You don't go hardly down at all, probably only about 500 or 600 feet. What is the, maybe 1,000 feet, okay? What's 1,000 feet in the Grand Canyon? I mean, after all. So you'll see the water dripping off the cliff. There's a little sign there, and it's pretty cool. So there's obviously some surface water. If you take the Boucher Trail, then you come back a little bit, and then take along the layers of the sediment. And that's what a lot of these trails do. You're gonna have a layer of sediment, and the trail's gonna go along the top for some distance, and it's gonna find a way to break through, then it will go down, and then it will go across the other layer. Okay, so the Boucher Trail will skirt across the top of this layer, looking at the other side of this side canyon to the Grand Canyon of the Hermit Trail. So the views are, of course, spectacular. And you will find surface water in the Boucher Trail down at the bottom on the top of the Tonto Formation. And then I took that back to Turquoise, came back, and then I circled, went over to the Hermit, and then up the Hermit, okay? Hermit would have to be my favorite trail in the Grand Canyon. And the views are spectacular. The trailhead's a little bit off the beaten path. There is a concession there, which I imagine is operated in the summer. And of course, when the winter is happening in the ideal time, so that's when I did the Hermit Trail, then to do my last section of the Tonto. And I start out, and of course it's snow at the top. And usually in the summer, then it's mild at the top. So you got choices, but the extreme 5,000 feet elevation is going to involve an entirely different climate, geology, vegetation situation. So you're going to have to understand that part of the experience. So I hiked down the Hermit, and of course it's snowy at the top, and I get to the Tonto Trail, and I get out of my pants, and I've got my hiking shorts on then, and then I head east, and there's some guys on the Hermit Trail, and he says, "Oh man, how could you hike in shorts? It's so cold." And I was thinking, dude, you think it's cold now? It's 10 degrees at the rim, and down here it's 50, so it's not cold at all. So expect lots of variation. All right, so anyway, Boucher Trail, off the Dripping Springs down to the Tonto. I saw some deer down there. There is again a little stream. And the part of the Tonto west of Hermit is a little obscure, okay, especially as you get out towards South Pass. And east of the Grandview, it's a little obscure. But between the Hermit and Grandview, it's pretty easy. Gets a lot more traffic, I think, down there, okay? All right, so Boucher and Dripping and Hermit, okay. Additionally, on the Hermit Trail, there is a spring of water there, so you have some surface water on the way down, but it's near the top. But if you were coming up, that could be a good thing to have. Why is water such a big issue? We don't have much of it, so you're gonna need to carry it or find it. If you're gonna find it, you're gonna have to treat it. And if you're gonna carry it, it's very heavy and difficult to do, okay? Again, the Hermit does have some surface water, great views of the Boucher across the side canyon. You can see Dripping Springs, so we'll have a picture there which will lay out where everything is at. And there are some other trails that go down from the Tonto to the river, down various side canyons, and I did not take those because I was just doing the Tonto, okay? All right, let me mention quickly about the Grandview before we shift to the North Rim. All right, the Grandview, very well-developed trailhead, about a few miles east of the village, not far, and very well-established trail, easy to follow, no mules, no issues. Once you get to there's no surface water, to the Horseshoe Mesa that sits atop, which is offering you then the grand view of the Grand Canyon, all right? If you decide to then go down to the Tonto from the Grandview, you have three choices. The west side to Cottonwood Creek, where you should find surface water down below. The middle section, which is nothing, just gonna go straight down to the Tonto. On the east side, though, you will find a spring partway down, and you will also find New Hance Creek with water down where it meets the Tonto. Okay, so you have some surface water options there. There's also some history there. You'll see a sign that says warning, warning, radioactive mining, uranium, and so forth. So there has been some historical efforts to extract some minerals from there, and some of them were radioactive. You're not going to glow once you come out of there, don't worry, all right? All right, finally, let's go to the North Rim quickly, and we'll conclude our tour of the Grand Canyon hiking variety. And of course, like Harvey Bouchard would say, there's so many other trails. This is just tip of the iceberg, but I wanted to introduce you to some of the best, some of the things that have some historical significance, and they're not so obvious, like the corridor trails. These are some different approaches to the canyon. All right, North Rim, Nankoweap Trail. According to the Park Service, this is the most difficult trail in the Grand Canyon, and I attempted it 2 or 3 times before I actually finally completed it. But the first time I tried it was in May. Horrible idea. Again, hiking in an oven. the approach, the trailhead that I took, there's two trailheads. One is in House Rock Valley, which you can access any time of year, as long as the weather allows you to get in there. But this is not up on the Guidebooks Plateau, which does close in the winter because of the snow. If we have snow, and you'll see some snow maybe on those helicopter videos, which we circled around to the North Rim, pretty spectacular. All right, so the approach I took here, so you're gonna hike to a saddle, Marion Point, all right? And I got to the trailhead about 10 in the morning, driving up, I guess, from where I was living at the time. I don't even know where that was, probably Prescott. And then I started hiking. I got to Marion Point, pitched my tent, stopped right there, day one, about 2 in the afternoon. There's lots to look at. Again, you'll see pictures, the trail along layers. There's some history claims that they used to run horses, stolen horses, down the Nankoweap, cross the river, up to Tanner. I do not believe that, until a horse fell over the edge and then they quit doing it. Well, you have to shinny down about a 10-foot cliff, climbing on a dead juniper tree to get down this section. I do not believe horses did that, but whatever. History is written by not dead horses, I'll tell you that. So then I went from Marion Point down to Nankoweap Creek. All right, and there was surface water there. This was in November when I finally made this, but having to carry water, and I left a gallon of water at Marion Point where my tent was, okay? So I have water coming back up because there's not gonna be any water coming back up, and it's about 14 miles to the river, all right? So stashed water, left it there. So by carrying the tent and all the water from the start was a 50-pound pack, which was more than I've carried in a while because I'm not a pack animal, don't like to carry a lot of weight. And I'm getting older, you can tell. All right, so I camped out the next night down at the creek. Okay, that's day 2. Day 3, come back up to Marion Point where I have water stashed. I also stashed, I think, a half gallon on the way down as well at a different place. And then I hiked back out to the trailhead from Marion Point with the empty water jugs and my tent, so the pack was a lot lighter. All right, so that's Nankoweap Trail, a part of the canyon, North Rim, and the eastern end of the Grand Canyon. Saddle Mountain Wilderness is right there, so that's another trail option. And in the May and spring, you're going to get a lot of wildflowers, but in November, not so much. But the temperatures, because hiking in this on the North Rim is full sun going anywhere, all right? So that's not a good thing to do in the summer. Now, last trail is not actually in the canyon. It's called the Rainbow Rim Trail, and it is on the very top. One of the cool things that we saw while hiking there was woodland buffalo. I've never seen buffalo in the wild, and they were out there on the meadows as you searched out this trailhead. So this trail is in the Guidebooks National Forest. It is west of the highway leading to the rim from Jacobs Lake, about 10 miles or so west to the rim. And it is about 25-mile loop, and you could do it as a loop or do up and back, various trailheads. Passenger cars can get there. There's no services out there. It's dispersed camping, but the views are phenomenal. The woodland buffalo are phenomenal. The wildflowers are phenomenal. This is you're totally on the top 10, the highest, coolest hiking or biking in Arizona, Guidebooks Plateau. So this is a summer situation. You're going all the way around North Rim that far, then you're gonna want to take in as much as you can. So there's East Rim, West Rim trails, all kinds of things to see. So this trail just skirts the edge of the canyon, gets a little bit back from the edge at a few points, but it's all basically flat because it's all just across the rim at the top. Okay, Rainbow Rim Trail. Well known by bicyclists apparently, but hikers should take advantage of it. All right, that concludes our tour of the Grand Canyon. You've got to see it. It's Arizona's icon, and no telling what we'll have next for you in our series on the variety of hiking in Arizona. Check out these videos from the helicopter. I think you'll enjoy them.